I want to start with a question. Imagine it's a year from now. What do you think your organization is going to look like? And to answer that question, every one of us has a sense or intuition that tells us what's possible for our future. At Novus Global, we like to represent that intuition as a circle or a kind of fence that we call an intuitive fence. If our intuition says something is possible, we say it's inside the intuitive fence. If our intuition tells us something is impossible, we say it's outside our intuitive fence. And the closer you get to the edge of the fence, the less possible things appear to you. As an example, if you were to ask a leader how much their organization is going to grow this year, they may say 5%. Now, for a lot of leaders, that seems totally possible, right in the center of the intuitive fence. But as you increase that percentage, you get closer and closer to the edge of the fence until it feels possible but improbable, and then eventually not possible. That's how your intuitive fence works, and all of us have one. Now, individuals don't just have intuitive fences, teams do too. And everyone's intuition on your team combined to create what we call an intuition ecosystem, a kind of mutually reinforcing unspoken conversation of what's possible and not possible. Now, generally, the fences of the leaders at the top of the organization are bigger. And as you move farther away from the top, people's intuitive fences tend to become smaller. Of course, this isn't always true. Sometimes someone in the middle of the organization has a bigger intuitive fence than those at the top, which means that what they believe is possible is more than what the leadership above them believes. If someone has a bigger fence than their leader, they tend to either shrink their intuitive fence to fit in, get promoted, or most of the time, leave. This keeps the intuitive fence of the team in a kind of static homeostasis created by the people who have the most influence. Either way, an organization's success will depend on how big a leader and their team's intuitive fences are. This is because we never accomplish goals we're unwilling to believe are possible. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Whether we like it or not, sometimes our intuition lies to us, especially about what's possible, and it lies to us in at least two ways. First, our intuition tells us that anything outside the fence doesn't exist. This is because when something occurs to us as impossible, we usually treat it like it's invisible, meaning we don't pay attention to it. You see, it's inefficient to waste brain power on impossible things. So your intuition hides it from you in order to make your life easier. The problem is possibilities you can't see do exist. And not only that, they almost always are the possibilities that are the most powerful for your future. This means that there are things for you right now that are entirely possible for your leadership, for your family, for your teams, for your organization that you can't even see because your intuition is just too small. The second lie our intuition tells us is that our fence is fixed, static, immovable. It tries to convince you that what it's telling you about what's possible is true. But I can tell you from working with teams for decades now that our fences are expandable. And that is really, really good news because then it changes the question. You see, if a fence is fixed, the question is, how big is our fence? But if our fence is expandable, then the question becomes, how big do we want our fence to be? You see, as coaches, when we ask this question, leaders are often shocked to find that people on their teams actually want to have bigger fences than their intuition is allowing them to have. And when teams begin to expand their intuitive fences together, they begin to accomplish what previously occurred to them as impossible. So here's a few ways to practically apply this idea with your teams. First, introduce them to the concept of intuitive fences. I am always amazed at how malleable fences become once they see they have one. Second, create regular spaces where you can collectively expand your fences together. And third, and this is so important, celebrate when people accomplish things that were previously outside their intuitive fence. This will continue to remind them that not only are intuitive fences expandable, but more importantly, going outside of them is actually kind of fun. It's a type of fun that sadly, too few people get to experience in their lives. Part of the joy of leadership is inviting others into the thrill of challenging their own fences. The world is longing for leaders and teams who can see the invisible and therefore do what occurs to others as impossible. So when it comes to your next year, how big is your intuitive fence? How big is your team's? And more importantly, how big do you want it to be?
Well, Jason, thank you so much for those words. I love that question. How are you expanding your intuitive fence? I think we were asking that in the chat. We'll get to those in just a second.
And we all have influence, right? And we want to say thank you to Jason Jaggard for that, for his influence, for his leadership, short and saying that we can all expand our intuitive fence. We've been asking that question, and we have some answers in the chat. I think we should take it over to social media, though, don't you think? And,
Yeah, I think so.
And talk to Jason.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I think, well, Jason's been out there all day.
Jason's been outside all day.
Outside all day, yeah.
I know. We haven't let him inside the
I don't know that
building.
he's super happy about.
He's
We're in here
definitely
in
not
the
happy
AC,
about it.
all these fine people, and
But
the air
we
conditioning.
invite you to check in with Jason. He's been keeping tabs on everything social media using the hashtag GLS21. You can also find it Instagram, Twitter at GLN Summit, right?
Yep.
Right? And you can follow along.
Yeah, that's right. So we would love for you actually to share your dream with us. As we talked about kind of at the beginning of the day, we talked about this wake up and dream idea. So something that we've kind of started doing here, kind of behind the scenes, backstage, and we would love for you to share your dream with us on social media. As a matter of fact, Paula, I'm going to ask you.
I was going to ask you first.
Well, I see. I beat you to it.
Okay, so you want to know my leadership
I want to
dream?
know what your leadership dream is.
My leadership dream is to take more risks.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
I want to be a risk taker.
Yeah, that's really good. Getting outside your comfort zone. That's been, I feel
want
like
to bust outside my
a
comfort
thread
zone.
today is there's several things that are kind of, and we'll probably talk about this more later, but this idea of taking risks, getting outside your comfort zone, authenticity, vulnerability, which I know we all have a really, really tough time with. Yeah, it's really, really tough.
That is a key word.
To do that. I'd have to say for me, my leadership dream would probably be to, and so I'm a big Joshua 1:9 fan. I know that you are as well, and it just talks about, have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? That's kind of my life verse. And so for me, my leadership dream would be to inspire courageous strength. I feel like this is a time when we all need courage. We all need to be stronger in everything we do, and a lot of that does involve taking risks.
We want to hear from you. Weigh in on social media. Tell us your leadership dream. How can people do that? You're the social media guy.
Am I?
Yeah.
Wow.
You and Jason Jagger.
And Jason,
I'm
of
terrible
course. Don't
on
forget about
social
Jason.
media.
Jason, we haven't forgotten about
Jason
you. Make sure
outside.
you go visit Jason. Follow us at GLN Summit on Instagram, on Twitter, and please just tag us. You can write it on a piece of paper. You can write it on a card. You can write it on a whiteboard.
You can write it on your bicep.
You could.
You can if
You
you
could do
want.
that. Yeah.
Whatever.
Or you could just say it out loud. Say it out loud, record yourself, selfie style, and then make sure you post that using the hashtag GLS21. We want to see what your dream is. Let's see if collectively, all 80,000 of us across the world right now can go and collectively share what we're dreaming about in our leadership journey moving forward.
But the important thing is to say it out loud.
That's right.
Just to put it out
because
there.
that's when it becomes real.
And we all love reality, right?
That's right. That's right. We
Okay.
sure do.
So they're sharing their dreams backstage. Do you want to take a look?
Yeah, I think we should totally do that.
We have some backstage dreams. Are we seeing those?
We have those now?
Look at these dreams backstage. I can't
Oh,
read
is that
these.
you?
Yeah, there's a couple of us. We're actually ripping Jason Jagger's dreams in half in the top left. But these are some of our dreams. So this is Trey and I sharing our dreams.
That's right.
With Jason, who says he just wants to be friends with us. And
He
we are
does.
friends with Jason. But
So-
post your dreams. Tell us your dreams, your leadership dreams, again, using the hashtag GLS21. All of this learning, you guys, it's all for you. These next 2 days, it's all for you to take it to the next level. So participate with us. It's more fun when you're part of the conversation.
That's right. But right now, we know that you're ready for more incredible insight, and I cannot think of a better person to start this session for so that we can get toward the end of this day. Coming up next is the one and only Rich Wilkerson Jr. So here we go, session 4.
Anybody can have a good idea. Anybody can get to the starting line. The Launchpad is a place of exhilaration, but longevity requires commitment to the full journey. How do we push through the headwinds? Or how do we sail when there is no wind at all? Here to share with us about the marks of a persistent leader is Rich Wilkerson Jr. As the pastor of VU Church, the co-founder of VU Conference, and an author, Rich Wilkerson Jr. is leading a faith community that has reached well over 100 countries. In this session, we'll be reminded that a bold legacy doesn't happen by accident. It's forged in the grit and the grind. That's why the Global Leadership Summit is thrilled to welcome Rich Wilkerson Jr.
Well, come on, Global Leadership Summit. Can we make a little bit of noise out there today? Come on. So good to be here. I am pumped. This is my very first time getting to be at the summit. I have watched from afar for many, many years, and in many ways, it's such a dream and such an honor to stand up on this stage. And I don't know about you, but I have been learning. I'm already on the path of growing. So many amazing speakers and so many incredible teachers. Can we just put our hands together? Can we just thank them one more time for all that we've already learned? It's just fantastic. I love what Craig Groeschel says, as the leader gets better, everyone gets better. And today, my assignment is to speak to you for the next few moments from the subject, the grind of leadership. The grind of leadership. Anybody out there ever met somebody so positive, they almost make you negative? For me, that was my dad growing up. My dad, well, he's a rare breed. My dad's favorite line in the world is, "This is great!" He, no matter what happens to him, I mean, you could throw my dad and myself into a pit, and he would say, "This is great!" And you'd be like, "Dad, no, this isn't great. We're up in a pit, yo." He would say, "I know, it's great. We're together." I'm like, "Dad," he just is the eternal optimist. And one of the valuable lessons that my dad taught me from a very, very young age is all about this idea of a positive outlook. Now, I firmly, firmly believe it, that oftentimes outlook will determine the outcome. And I think that we're living in a day and age right now where there's so many young leaders that are seeking a great outcome, but what they fail to remember is that great outcomes don't happen overnight. Come on, somebody, they happen over time. It's one thing to have a vision. It's something completely different to see that vision come to fruition. Because from here to there is this big space, and it is filled with this one word, and the word is called the grind. Now, I don't know if you've taken time recently to look up the word grind, but it's an interesting word. By definition, it is laborious or routine work. If you're out there and you're leading, you know that leadership is a grind. It's work, it's serving, it's giving, it's delivering, it's helping, it's showing up again and again and freaking again. You just keep showing up. It is all in the grind. And so much of what you do and so much of what you're going back to do, well, it's unheard and it's unseen, and many times it goes unthanked. I think the greatest leader, most of us can agree with this, is Jesus Christ. And one of the most valuable lessons I learned from Jesus is there's this story in the Bible where Jesus, he heals 10 men who have leprosy. But if you know the story, only one of these guys comes back to say thank you. I think it's safe to say that 90% of what you do in leadership is gonna go uncelebrated. Come on, if this was the case for Jesus, how much more for us? You and I are gonna have to get committed to the grind. You and I are gonna have to recognize that anything great, it comes from a grind. A great marriage is a grind. A great family is a grind. A great career is a grind. A great calling is a grind. And we've been talking about a lot at this conference so far, but if you wanna have a dream, come on, in order to see that dream come to pass, you're gonna have to grind through it. Leadership is a grind. And what I've noticed more often than not is when I look across the landscape, especially with millennial leaders, is that so many leaders today are not lost in some epic battle, but rather they're lost in the daily grind of things. It's not this one-time moment that takes out the leader, it's the monotony. I wonder today if we can, for the next few moments, challenge ourselves to start to think about the monotonous things that we do and understand this key principle, that how I steward the mundane moments, well, is the thing that's gonna create the memorable moments. Today, I wanna just take a few moments and I wanna speak to you around 3 things that you must remember to do. Because listen, Summit is awesome and I'm already inspired and I'm already ready to change the world, but yo, Monday's coming. And when you show up on Monday, you actually have to put this work into practice. And I wanna just give you 3 practical things that you can do come this Monday that I believe is gonna help you in the grind. Number 1, if you're taking notes, I think this is important, write this down. The first thing you have to do is you have to rename the grind. Rename the grind. Now, I'm really big into names. My wife, 4 weeks ago, she gave birth to our 3rd child. Now, I'm really excited because my wife and I, we went on an 8-year journey of infertility. And so we waited 8 years praying, asking God. And after 8 years, we encountered a God who still turns impossible things into possible moments. And so I've got 3 under 3. Just pray for me, okay? I don't care if you're Pentecostal or not. Extend your hands right now and pray for your boy, okay? My kids, well, they've all got different names, of course. My firstborn, he's 3 years old. His name is Wyatt Wesley Wilkerson. It's a strong name. My second son, his name is Wild Wesley Wilkerson. Now, that might have been a mistake. I'm not going to lie, okay? He's living up to his name. Our third, who was just born 4 weeks ago, I'm really proud to announce because it's a girl. So hashtag I'm a girl dad now. Her name is Waylon Wesley Wilkerson. So their initials are WWW. We just call them World Wide Web for short, okay? They're miracles in our house, but I love naming things because names bring about an identity. I remember when VOO Church first began, the very first thing that we got was a little office space. It was less than about 2,000 square feet. But I remember I stopped the staff as we were in that little rented space. I said, announcement, this is not to be called an office, but rather this is headquarters. Why? Because nobody's ever changed the world with an office. But a headquarters, come on, baby, that's got a nice ring to it. We were renaming it. I name all sorts of things. I name every day of the week. For me, it's Meeting Monday. It's Tackle Tuesday. It's Wrap Up Wednesday. It's Think A Lot Thursday. It's Free Friday. It's Semi-Slow Saturday. Come on, baby. It is Slam Sunday. Why? Because identity brings about purpose. I wonder if there's some of us in this room today that we are in a season that we don't like very much. We're in a season right now where we are grinding. What you need to know is that everything that you are facing in this season is part of the plan for what you're gonna need in the next season. Maybe what you need to do today is simply rename the season you're in. Maybe you got the wrong name going on. Maybe right now you're going through something and it kind of just feels like the season you're in is a waste. Why not rename it and rename it to preparation? Maybe you're facing some stuff right now that just feels really boring at work. Why not rename it to research and development? Maybe you're going, I'm just so tired in this season. Well, why not rename the season and say this is a training season? Maybe you're going, I'm just so stressed out. Everything I'm facing, I'm just fully stressed. Why don't you rename it to I'm being stretched? Oh, but this season is so hard. You got the wrong name. Why don't you rename it to I'm getting stronger in this season? I'm making a decision right here, right now, today to put the right name in order to gain purpose for where I am. Listen to me. God won't multiply what you fail to maximize. We must understand that every season that we are in is important and has purpose. I grew up and my uncle was a part of the coaching staff of the University of Washington Huskies football team. And I don't know if you ever met a coach, but I like coaches, man. He was the typical quintessential, everything you thought about a coach, you know. It's like he had a whistle on. It's like, it's Friday night, Uncle. He's like, I got a whistle, you know. And he used to always say, where I'm at is the big time. I love that because we live in a day and age right now where everybody's goal seems to be the same. What is it? Big. We just want big. We are addicted. We think bigger is better. And hear me, I'm not against big and I'm definitely not against growth. What I do want to make sure that we understand is that we must remember that everything big used to be small. And big is actually a state of mind. It's something that you speak out loud. I'm not going to let my feelings dictate my purpose. I'm making a decision to let my purpose dictate my feelings. I'm going to say it a new way. Something I teach to young leaders everywhere that I go is get good at looking at something that appears to be small and declare out loud with your mouth, this is big. I don't care, but on Monday morning when you wake up and you get the kids up for school and you finally drop them off at school and nobody killed anyone, say, this is big. When you get to work on time, say, this is big. When you choose to stay engaged in the meeting and apply yourself and bring your best self to that meeting, say, this is big. When you sit back down for dinner with your family and you say a prayer and you thank God for the roof over your head and the shoes on your feet, get good at out loud declaring, this is big. Come on, somebody, if you believe that today, go ahead and put your hands together all over this room. This is big. We got to get good at renaming the grind, but it's not just about renaming it. We have to reframe the grind. I start by renaming it, but then secondly, I must reframe it. Listen to me. If you don't choose to see what you're going through in a different way, you'll get tired of saying it a different way. You will grow weary in doing good if you don't choose to see it differently. I really believe that we don't see things the way that they are. We see things the way that we are. If I don't see my wife as valuable, I'm not going to add value. If I don't see my job as valuable, I won't add value. If I don't see my clients as valuable, I'm not going to add value. What happens so often in life is that we have a poisoned perspective. And this poisoned perspective, well, it prevents us from progress and it prevents us from moving forward. Because once again, it's not just how we see it, it's really about who we actually are. So if I am broken, everything I'm going to see is going to be broken. If I'm toxic, everything I see around me is going to be toxic. If I am full of fear, everything I look through will be the lens of fear. We have to shift it, and we have to get a healthy mindset. There's so many things that I'd love to share around this, but I think the biggest takeaway I can give you for this next week is the healthiest mindset a leader can take on is always the mindset of gratitude. Things you appreciate tend to get better. Things you depreciate tend to get worse. You have to choose to be grateful in order for you to see that which you're facing in a healthy manner. Now, there's so many things in the culture that we live in right now that rob us from seeing with the lens of gratitude. We can just go through them. I mean, the biggest one I can think of right now is that we live in a comparison culture. I don't know if you know this, but we have these little devices at times that sometimes they seem to be influenced by the devil. It's called Instagram because it forces us to look at other people's lives more than we actually live our own lives. Some of us right now, it's like we're being robbed because we're comparing our story to somebody else's story. And if you want to stop living out your calling, try to run out somebody else's. You ever notice this? It's like, I didn't know how unhappy I was until I discovered how happy you are. You were really happy with your Ford Focus until your friend got a BMW. You loved your job until your roommate got a promotion. You thought your paycheck was great until you found out what somebody else was making. You've always loved that apartment. That's the apartment you wanted until your sister finally bought that house. It's the comparison culture, and it stops me and robs me from gratitude. Many times I'll get a chance to go and speak at conferences like this, and I'll talk to some young pastor, and they'll say, Rich, it's just so cool to see what God has been doing through VU Church in Miami. I just wish that God could do something like that here where I live. I always go, thank you so much. I appreciate what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, but I just need to make sure I'm really clear with you. Instagram is a lie. Don't believe everything you see on my Instagram page. Why? Because I'm not posting my bad days. We're not posting at VU Church empty seats. We're only posting the highlights. No, the grass is not green on the other side. The grass is green where you choose to water it. We have to fight back against comparison, but it's not just comparison, right? It's this idea that we live in that robs us of gratitude. It's called perfectionism. We don't just want to be good, we want to be the best, and we do so with this intent that ends up robbing us from seeing the beauty of where we are right now. It stops us from reframing the grind. I think as leaders, and there's so many great ones here today and so many watching by way of the stream, we live with this perfectionism mentality. It should have been better. It could have been better. Right now, I've been enjoying watching the Olympics, and there's a psychological study. It's called the silver medal syndrome. It's a phenomenal study because what they found out is that bronze medal winners are actually happier in life than silver medal winners. Why is it? I'll tell you why. It's because the silver medal winner is up on the podium going, it should have been better. It could have been better. I was so close to being perfect. But the dude who won the bronze medal is like, yo, it could have been so much worse. I was so close to nobody even knowing that I existed. They're up on the podium like, yo, we made it. And I want to say to every leader out there that we have to shift our mindset. We have to reframe the grind. Stop saying it could have been better and start saying it could have been worse. You might not be exactly where you want to be in life, but come on, is there anybody thankful that you are not where you used to be? You are growing, you are progressing, you are getting better. Little by little, we have traveled a long way. The grind of leadership, well, it just is what it is. It's work, it's serving, it's showing up. But I choose to rename it, I choose to reframe it. And lastly, as we close, choose to remain in the grind. I just sense this so on my heart right now. Remain in the grind. What you're doing is so meaningful. What you're doing, it matters. What good is it to gain ground if you don't know how to stand your ground? I talk to so many young leaders right now. It's like, Rich, which direction should I head in? And you know what? I just got to be honest with you. This is not a season that I'm comfortable to tell people which direction they should head in. For this is not a season right now that we find ourselves in history about a direction. This is a season about a posture. My Bible says after you've done everything you can to stand, you stand firm. You remain in it. Not every season in life is about conquering. Some seasons are simply about enduring. And there are leaders here today that you need to make up your mind before Monday, I'm going to remain in the grind. No matter what the rejection, no matter what the criticism is, no matter the challenge, I'm going to remain in it. I told you, my dad, he's my hero, and I could talk ages and ages about him, but he's the greatest, and he taught me so much about leadership, taught me so much about outlook. But my dad, when we were growing up, he would throw us into situations that he knew that we were going to fail. And the reason why is because he was teaching us a principle, that it's not about what happens to you in life, but rather it's about how you respond to what happens to you in life. So from a young age, every once in a while, my dad would wake us up on Saturday mornings real early, 6 a.m. Dad would be like, boys, get up. I'm like, Dad, what are we doing? He's like, we're going door-to-door witnessing today. I'm like, excuse me, I don't even know if Jesus is awake right now, Dad. Shut up, Rich, get in the car. Yes, sir, yes, sir. My dad is, I'm 4 generations Pentecostal preacher. My dad was drinking Red Bull before Red Bull was created, okay? We'd be driving through a neighborhood. He had these eyes going. I go, Dad, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? He's like, I'm looking for a house, son. I'm looking for a house. I say, you're looking for a house? What do you mean? He's like, I'm looking for a house for you to go and share the gospel. And so we pull up to a house. I don't know. I'm 12 years of age. He'd say, Rich, go up there and just knock on that door and tell those fine folks about the gospel. Let me tell you, you have never lived until you knock on someone's door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to talk about their eternal future. I would say, Dad, what do you mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, you gonna come? He's like, no, son, I'm gonna stay right here. I'm gonna pray for you. I'd say, Dad, I'm scared. He would say, this is great. We'll walk up to that doorstep, look back, Dad drove off. I'm standing there by myself. You know, you knock on the door. Door opens up. What do you want? Hi, sir. My name is Richie Wilkerson Jr., and I don't know where my dad went. He left, but just go in the docks. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Like, the door would, boom, slam in your face. You're like, okay, that didn't go good. I think I just failed. I'd say, Dad, are we done? He'd say, no, son, let's go to the next house. You'd be like, I don't know if I want to go to the next house. I just peed my pants at the last house. Get to the next house, you knock on the door opens up. What do you want? Hi, sir. My name's Richie Wilkerson Jr., and I want to tell you that Jesus loves you. I don't know why I'd go into song every time, you know? Boom, the door shuts in your face. Dad, let's go to the next house. And walk over to the next house, and you knock on the door. What do you want? Hi, sir. My name's Richie Wilkerson Jr. My dad's not here, but just want to let you know God loves you. He's for you. He's got a good plan for you. Boom, the door shuts in your face. One house, two houses, three houses. Every door that I went to, the door was slammed in my face. But I don't know what it is. I don't know how many houses it would take you. But somewhere between the third house and the fourth house, something on the inside would begin to shift. Something would begin to change. It's like you would catch this revelation. Oh, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. And from the third house to the fourth house, it's like you got this brand new confidence after you've had a little taste of failure and you got back up that I'm not going to quit and I'm not going to stop. And now you start walking to the fourth house, but it's a new swag that you got. It's called Holy Ghost swag. And you walk up to the fourth house, it's like, Dad, stay in the car. I got this one. Boom, boom, boom. Even your knock changes. Door opens up. What do you want? How you doing, sir? My name is Reverend Rich Wilkerson Jr. I'm here to tell you about Jesus Christ. 2,000 years ago, he came to this earth, born in a little manger. He lived a spotless life, a sinless life. But they put him up on a cruel cross, and there he died and declared, it is finished. Guy tries to slam the door. Hold that door. Don't you shut that door, sir. I said, he's finished. I'm not finished. Come on, somebody. I'm trying to tell you that even when you face rejection, even when you face failure, you make a decision. I will remain in the grind. I'm not backing down. I'm called to be a leader. I'm called to make a difference. When you start renaming it and you start reframing it and you choose to remain in it, what happens is you produce this word. It's called resiliency. Resiliency. And there's this little verse in the Bible that I close with that simply says, the righteous man, he falls 7 times, but he gets back up. And I'm making a commitment today here at the Global Leadership Summit that as I find myself back in my local context leading our church in Miami, Florida, I'm choosing today to get back up, to remain in the grind, to understand that the meetings I walk into on Monday, they might feel mundane, but as I choose to steward them, I'm gonna make some memorable moments. Listen to me, it is always too soon to quit. You are needed, you are valuable, and the best is still yet to come. Come on, thank you so much. Appreciate it. God bless.
Hello, I'm a doctor in the Middle East. For safety reasons, I can't tell you my name or show you my face. But it's important that I tell you my story. This year has been extremely challenging for me and my staff. I have 35 frontline medical workers under me. As you might imagine, the additional burden of the COVID-19 virus has left us all exhausted. At times, I've been tempted to quit. Last year, my friend asked me if I would like to have a life-changing experience at an event called the GLS. I was skeptical. You see, in my country, it's not safe to gather at an event like the GLS. But because of his excitement, I went. Then the session started. What I was seeing and hearing was changing something in my heart. It was an infusion of life and hope for me. As the conference came to a close, I realized my friend was right. I was not the same person I was when I first sat down. God was teaching me how to be more compassionate to humanity. Then my friend told me that the GLS was only able to happen in our city because of the generous donations of summit attendees. Their giving was the reason we were able to experience the summit safely. And then I realized how many volunteers were helping to make the GLS happen, risking their lives by serving in this way. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I'm so thankful. I have a whole new perspective, and I can see the positive difference in my leadership rippling through my staff down to our patients. I know that there will be more tough years like this ahead, but now I and my team have this renewed energy to keep serving and saving lives with love and compassion.
Do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. Who's heard this career advice? I have. You know, it means follow your passion. Now, when I graduated from business school, I knew what I was passionate about: leadership, teaching leadership. So I set my sights on a job with the top management training company. I scored an interview with the president, and in the interview, he took a look at my resume, and then he gave me some advice. He said, "Well, you might want to actually get some management experience before teaching other people how to manage," which seemed incredibly narrow-minded to me. And clearly, he didn't understand my dream. And he didn't offer me a job, so I took a job as a program manager with a young, rapidly growing software company called Oracle. Now, after a year, I had a chance to transfer to the internal training department. Now, this group ran boot camps for new college graduates. It was mostly product training, but see, I was hoping that their charter would expand to include leadership training. You know, you see, managers were young and inexperienced, they weren't getting any training, and they were wreaking havoc on their teams. Everyone could see it. So in my final job interview with Bob, the VP of this group, I raised this issue. We talked about it, and he could see it. And so then, I very confidently told Bob, Oracle needs a management boot camp, and I would love to build it. Now, Bob's reaction, it was priceless. He said, "Liz, that's great. We think you're great. But your boss actually has a different problem. See, over the next year, she's got to figure out how to get 2,000 new college graduates up to speed on Oracle technology. And what would be great is if you could help her figure that out." See, Bob was polite, but what I heard was crystal clear. What he was saying was, "Liz, hey, why don't you try making yourself useful?" They needed technical trainers. And I wanted to teach, but honestly, I had zero passion for the nuances of correlated subqueries and the virtues of database indexing techniques. And I was woefully underqualified to be teaching coding to a bunch of hotshot programmers from MIT. See, I wanted to develop leaders. And now Bob wanted me to teach programming to a bunch of nerds. It was not the job I wanted, but it was the job that was needed. So I embraced my inner nerd, and I learned to be a technical trainer. Not a bad one. But what about following our passion? Like, it makes for compelling commencement speeches. And it is a smart strategy when choosing your career, or picking a company to work for, or starting a company. But when we are on a team, when we follow our passion, it can take us off course. See, we see ourselves, off and running. But what does our team see? They see this. They see someone off and running in the wrong direction. But on the other hand, when we are overly duty-bound, we get trapped in the logic of job descriptions and stuck in these organizational boxes that don't match the real work. Because the real work, it's messy. It doesn't fit nicely into any one person's job. Like, we're in position, and we've missed the opportunities to contribute to what's important. See, in both of these cases, we're working really hard without a lot of impact. And we often are left underappreciated, and we feel it. This was the case for a worship leader at a large church in California. He was good at his job. He worked hard. He kept his leaders informed, but his weekly email to his boss, the senior pastor, well, that got this reaction. We've all gotten that reaction, haven't we? Here's what I'm working on. So I shared with him what I had learned from my own experience as an instructor in Nerdville. And I shared with them what I've learned from my research studying the top contributors and the most influential players in the workplace. They're people I call impact players. Now, he could begin to see that what he was doing is he was pushing his own agenda rather than serving a higher agenda. And I suggested to him, why don't you figure out what's important to your boss and then make that important to you? Well, he did. And he quickly revamped his weekly emails to the senior pastor. He let the senior pastor know two things. Number one, here's what I understand to be the most important work. And number two, here's how I'm working on what's most important. Well, now those emails got a very different reaction. Yeah, it looked like this. How about you? Are you doing your job and doing it well, or are you doing the job that actually needs to be done? See, that VP at Oracle, he gave me this priceless advice. When I decided to make myself useful, to be of service, rather than vie for a job, I got tapped for bigger jobs, and my influence grew. And my work, boom, it landed with impact. If you want your work to make a difference, if you want to have an enormously positive influence, figure out the job that really needs to be done, and then serve where you're needed. When you do, you'll be seen as a leader, you'll get a chance to play bigger, and when you partner with God, like, your work gets multiplied, and your impact gets multiplied. Thank you.
What do we mean when we talk about mental health? For the last 25 years, Dr. Henry Cloud has been working to remove the stigma around mental health and sharing ways for leaders, families, and organizations to both heal and mature. As the author of 45 books that have sold 20 million copies, Henry Cloud has coached CEOs, executives, and countless teams to improve their performance, culture, and leadership. Today, he'll address the different ways we can approach our own struggles and the struggles of those around us, and he'll provide a way forward for you to heal and be an agent of healing to those you lead. Over 150 million people worldwide have benefited from his books and guidance. That's why the Global Leadership Summit is honored to welcome Dr. Henry Cloud.
Every day you hear this term that we're in a mental health crisis. What is that? And what does it have to do with leadership? And what does it have to do specifically with your leadership? Well, as a psychologist and as a leadership consultant, one of the things that I hear pretty much every day is I get two questions. One is from leaders, what can I do to help the people in my community that I minister to, or the people in my organization who are struggling with these mental health issues? And secondly, how can I help the leaders? Because we also find that this mental health crisis is touching leaders. Now, why do we say it's a crisis? Well, you know, normally in America, and the numbers are bigger in other parts of the world, normally we have somewhere in the high teens, like 15, 17% or so, that people that would meet diagnostic criteria of having a mental health problem. Okay, now, after COVID, it's over 40% of Americans would be diagnosable by some criteria of having depression, anxiety, or an addiction. So when we're talking 40%, we're not talking about extremes out there. What we're talking about is we're talking about us. And we're talking about maybe some people in your family, maybe some people on your team, and certainly some people in your organization. And for a lot of you, I know because I work with you, you're experiencing some of this stuff yourself. So the first thing I wanted to do as we hop into this, because where we're headed is I want to help equip you as a leader of how to put your arms around this, both for yourself and for others. But the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to normalize it. Because we're not talking about extremes that you've seen in movies. The diagnostic categories are mood disorders. Anybody struggle with their mood in the last year? Anybody have like low energy or low-grade depression or even a significant depression? That's not extreme. What about anxiety disorders? That's a diagnostic category of mental health. Anybody got any stress? You got any anxiety? You're not sleeping well? You find yourself ruminating or worrying about things? How about addictions? You got some sort of pattern that you find you've lost a little control over. You don't have the degree of choice and ability to do or not do certain things anymore. See, all of that is what we're talking about here. And I'm telling you, it affects not only your well-being and the well-being of the people that you lead, but it also affects performance. And it does fall in a leader's purview to begin to address these things. So today we're going to normalize that, and I'm going to give you some very specific lanes to run in to do something about it. And to help me do that, I've asked someone to join us today. His name's Martin Hoekstra. And Martin, the reason I've asked him, I've known him for a long time. I've worked extensively with him and big agendas and big organizations that he's led. But he's a seasoned leader. He was a CEO on Wall Street, overseeing billions and billions of dollars and tens of thousands of employees, and leading through crises where people struggle with a lot of the things we're talking about. But also, he's one of us, he's a fellow journeyer who began to go into his own growth path and some issues that he needed to face. And he's going to serve both as a guide for us today about how this stuff can affect you as well as the people you lead. So the first thing we're going to see from Martin is sometimes a lot of times you feel this stuff. You know these issues are touching your soul and your heart, but sometimes they can be, and we're not aware of it. So the first step is becoming aware, either in ourselves or others, that there might be some things we need to look at. Let's hear from Martin.
I was in a really good spot in a job I loved. It was the most senior job I'd had up until that point, and I just had some habits I didn't like. The largest one was that I was really harsh with some people sometimes, and the other one was that there were certain things I would avoid and then other things I would dive into, and it wasn't necessarily the right things that I would choose to spend time on. And so I just went looking for somebody to help me with it. While I was on this little quest, Val, my wife, gave me your book, Integrity. She said, "You'll like this. It takes some things you believe and puts them in a framework." And I read the book and thought, yeah, I do like this. And I went looking for you, and it worked out really well.
You know, a couple of things stand out to me about what Martin said, I think that you can relate to. And one is you can be a very high performer and there still be kind of that next growth step that we need to become aware of to enter into. And that's what he did. Now, he was made aware of it a little bit from the outside. Sometimes that happens. Some of you actually feel you don't exactly know what it is, but you know you've got some kind of angst or pain or hurt or something that you need to take the next growth step in. The second part of this is that he mentioned it helped to have a framework because depression, anxiety, habit patterns, you know, how do we go get our arms around that? Well, what we're going to do today is provide a framework. And I'm going to give you 4 buckets, 4 lanes to go attack because all this stuff can be so vague and complicated. How do I go help mental health? Well, you can help. So one more thing, you know, today I'm talking to both business leaders and church leaders. I want to take 1 second here and talk to the church leaders. You know, for a lot of years, this mental health stuff, I think, has gotten confused in that we've made 2 categories. Like somebody's got an emotional problem, then you send them to the psychologist. If they have a spiritual problem, you send them to the church. Well, you know what? I don't believe that. Because here's the deal. Science and the faith agree. Science and the Bible agree that the issues that resolve these mental health problems are spoken specifically of by our faith, by the scriptures. And my strong belief is there are areas of spiritual growth and spiritual formation that actually cure these emotional issues in large measure. I want the church to know that as spiritual leaders, there are people hurting in your community, and your faith and everything that you bring to the party here is needed, and it's really important, and ultimately, it is what the faith is about. And I want to call you to go into your communities and to put your arms around this problem because you truly can help people. I'm going to give you 4 things to go focus on in you and your organization that is really going to move the ball down the field. Now, the reason I put it into this framework is, you know, as I said, how do you go attack a depression or anxiety or addictions? Well, that's hard to do, but you can attack the underlying causes. And when we look at all of these problems, apart from the, you know, the biological and the medical aspects, on the psychological and the spiritual dynamics that fuel these, they kind of fall into 4 big buckets. So let's hop into the first one. The first one is this: connection versus emotional isolation. Now, what is emotional isolation? Well, let me tell you what it's not. It's not physical isolation. I've never found a leader of an organization that's physically isolated, calling in orders from some other planet. No, you got people all around you all the time. But there's a quality of those relationships that mostly can fit into your own output, your giving. Okay, they're depending on you. There's not a lot of space in there a lot of times for the maybe isolated parts of your heart that are needing connection, that are needing comfort, that are needing support. Maybe because things are tapping into some earlier wounds you have that are needing some healing from some things you're walking around with. And you can get isolated from a part of your heart. Let me give you an example of this. I got a call one time from a very famous heart surgeon. He said, I got a problem, I want to come talk to you. And he told me a little bit, and the problem was, as high performing as he was, he also had this one little issue. He had pretty much slept with every nurse in the hospital. He got caught. Well, you know what? His wife said she would stick with him if he would commit to getting better. His partner's committed to sticking with him. So he put a plan together. He said, I want to come out and you look at my plan. He came out and he gave me the plan. And it consisted of, you know, he's going to have these morning spiritual disciplines he was going to do. And he's going to read a lot of books. He had a list. He's going to really start to attending. You know, he said, I'm going to attend to my wife's needs. Usually I come home and veg. Well, I'm going to really, you know, make sure that her needs are met and give to her. And it's a bunch of great stuff, except there was one problem with it. And when he asked me, what do you think? I said, well, I'm over here actually getting pretty depressed. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I think it's going to happen again. I'm getting depressed for your wife. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I think you're headed for a second heart attack. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, let me tell you something about the human heart. We both laughed because he's a famous surgeon. I said, doesn't the heart have two pipes coming in and two pipes going out? He said, well, yeah, kind of. I said, well, everything you just listed is output. I don't see anything coming in. You're going to run out of blood. Everything's going out. I said, the heart's a muscle that through trust opens itself up to receive the care and the support and the courage and the clarification and the instruction and the helping and the holding and the healing that it needs from the outside. Where did you learn to not depend on anything on the outside coming in to help you? And he got that look in his eyes that I've seen 1,000 times. And that's when somebody has that moment where the lights come on. I know when that happened, he said. I was 16 years old. My dad was an alcoholic, but he'd been functional, but then all of a sudden he fell off the wagon really bad. Had to be carted off to rehab. My mother, when that happened, had a nervous breakdown, had to go be hospitalized, actually for a couple of years. I had 3 or 4 younger siblings, he said, and I was 16 years old. He said, I walked out into the backyard, and I remember thinking, I guess it all depends on me now. And he said, so I raised my younger siblings. It did. It all depended on me. There wasn't anybody there for me anymore. And then I went to college and pre-med, medical school, and residency. He said, I've been on that treadmill of output ever since. Is that what you're talking about? I said, exactly. See, because that output, you got stress, and you got pain, and you got this stuff. That's never being touched anywhere. So what you're doing is trying to meet those needs, emotional needs, with a sexual answer, which is never going to do it. That's why we call it an addiction. And we got to start to meet them in the way that you're designed. So we added to his program. And he found a place and a space and activities to do in those spaces. It's interesting. Came back a year later, and he was doing so well. His wife came with him. Everything really, really going well. And he told me about his group and that where this good stuff happens. And they still have a call. In addition to what they do, they have a call every Sunday night where they all get on the phone and they process, where are you? That's what we're talking about in connection. You know, a baby comes into the world like a cell phone. You turn it on when you get off the plane, searching for connection. That's us. You have a chip inside of you, and from the womb to the tomb, that never goes away. And the highest, most thriving performers make sure they have this for themselves, but they also provide it in some form or fashion, and we can talk about that later, for their people as well. But I want you to have the eyes of diagnosing, looking at yourself. Some of this stuff may be driven by some emotional isolation, and also the eyes to see that some of your people may be having that as well. Let's see what Martin says about that.
I think when I came into the process with you, I was under a lot more stress than I realized, but was disconnected enough that I didn't identify it as that. So maybe some of the enlightened self-interest that could have kicked in had I realized that I was isolated would have driven me to go get some help more quickly. But that really wasn't something that was on my mind at the time. I probably had a sense that I was in better shape than I was because I wasn't experiencing sort of manifestations of anxiety or stress that I was recognizing as that. Actually, when I would hear people talk about executive isolation or lack of the possibility for executives to be vulnerable to other people, I always found that to be a little bit unrelatable. I thought at the time, you know, you're in the game, play the game. And it just wasn't part of what I was aware of at the time. Years later, I realized I was under a tremendous amount of stress, and it did drive lots of decisions that I made, but it wasn't apparent to me, or I found, to the extent that I could say more about what I was feeling or struggling with. Other people would do the same, and relationships would get better, not worse.
So Martin was kind of unaware of it, but if you don't, there were a few symptoms. He said he would, harshness would creep out and this, that, and the other. But he said something, he said, but I was in the game. You got to keep playing the game. Well, you got to keep playing the game. But that doesn't mean that you can't have some of these underlying crucial, vital issues resolved at the same time. So what are some of the symptoms? Well, it's all over the map. If you're not connected, you run out of fuel. You get depressed. Energy levels can go down. On the anxiety side, there can be all sorts of anxiety and fear and stress that actually is waiting for, as the Bible says, to have our hearts knitted together in love to calm that down. What does a kid do when they're afraid? They run to mommy's skirt, right? And they hang on, or daddy, or whoever it is. God's made us like that as well. That's what the tribe is for. So anxiety can come from disconnection. Acting out, impulse disorders, sexual addiction, all that stuff we see there. And sometimes our thinking gets really negative and worrisome, and we're suspicious, and all of that can be fueled by an underlying disconnected place that your heart is living in. So what do we do about it? Well, let me give you a kind of few categories to think about. Number one, you got to realize the need. You're not made, God's the only self-sustaining person. He's the creator. The rest of us are creatures. We have to have life put into us from the outside. So you got to realize this is a need. And once you realize, that's what we're doing today, we're raising awareness on this. But once you do that, you've got to find a safe place with the right kind of others. We have people around us, but we have to have a place where there is somebody or some bodies where you can be vulnerable, where you can be open, where you can begin to, take the lid off in those places where you're lonely or hurt or afraid or need healing. And then once we find that place, we got to enter into it. And entering into it means that we actually move into it. And once you move into it, that you actually begin to express that vulnerability. And that's going to be hard for some of you. You've never gone there. You've always been there for everybody else. And you know what? That's a scary moment. And I love that moment because you see leaders, there's parts of them that have been dead that get resurrected from the connection that they are designed to have their entire lives. Leadership can pull you out of connection and get you into isolation. And I don't want that to happen for you. So let's become more aware of this and find a safe place. Now remember, it might not be and probably isn't altogether in your organization. You need somebody that's not a stakeholder where you can be 100% vulnerable. I want that happening around your teams and people you work with as well to whatever degree is appropriate. But I want you also to have a safe place. It doesn't affect, you're not judged, you're not evaluated, but can be there for you. Okay, so the first bucket was connection. The second one is the issue of freedom. Freedom versus loss of self-control. Because what happens is once we're in relationships, it's really easy to lose our sense of freedom, lose our sense of autonomy, lose our choices because of the people we're in relationships with. Sometimes we get manipulated, we get controlled by people, or sometimes we lose control because they're not being responsible and we start to have to take control of their responsibilities. And now we've really lost our way because we're enabling and taking care of people and all this kind of stuff they call codependency. Well, that's not just in addicted families. That's in companies. That's in teams as well. And the other basic aspect of this is limit setting, where you say no to people that are hurting you as well as controlling you, or, doing something that's painful to you. We have to be able to say, that didn't feel good. That's not right. I'm not going to allow that. That's the limit setting of freedom. So what happens when we don't have this freedom that we're designed to have? Well, we get a lot of symptoms, as we'll see. But what does it look like in real life? Well, if you've ever heard me talk about this issue of boundaries, you've heard me tell a story about a family that came to see me one time. It was a mom and a dad and 2 adult kids in their 20s, adult children, right? And I said, so how can I help you? And the dad goes, well, I want you to fix my son. And I turned to the young man and said, so what's wrong with you? And he said, well, it's not me, it's my brother. And I said, well, where's he? Dad says, well, he didn't want to come today. And I said, why not? And he said, well, he doesn't think he has any problems. And I said, well, maybe he doesn't. He said, oh, yes, he does. And I said, well, he's not here. Maybe. He said, oh, yes, he does. And I said, well, what? He said, well, number one, he's got a drug problem. I said, well, that can be serious. What's he on? He said, well, he's been smoking dope since he was about 15. I said, how old is he now? He said, he's 23. I said, okay, so he's mellow. What else is going on? He goes, well, he's flunked out of 3 colleges. I thought for a second, I said, how do you do that? I mean, I know how to flunk out of 1, but how do I get in the second one? He said, well, I'm on the board of trustees, and I got him in, and you know, we tried everything. He said, I got him in the second college and didn't want all the partying in the dorms, so we bought him a nice condo off campus, made sure he had plenty of money, so he didn't have to work, interfere with studying, and he flunked out again. I go, wow, imagine that. Kids, what are you going to do? He didn't obviously get the enabling part of that. And then you saw the father's heart. He said, the thing that bothers me the most is he's 23 years old and he doesn't even have a college major. I thought for a second, I said, where is he today? He said, well, he's not here, he's in Colorado. And I said, where? And he said, Vail. I said, what's he doing in Vail? He said, he's skiing. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I don't think I can help your son. He said, why not? And I said, because I'm a psychologist and I help people that have problems. And frankly, I agree with him. I don't think he has any. He said, what are you talking about? He's got a drug problem. And I said, sir, the man is in Vail skiing. Does that sound like someone with problems to you? He's got a new home. He's got plenty of money. He's off on vacation. I don't think he has any problems. Now, I can't help somebody who doesn't have problems. I said, but you, on the other hand, I can help you because you got a lot of problems. He said, what are you talking about? What problems? I said, you got a drug problem. You got a can't find my niche problem. You got a flunk out. He said, that's not me. That's my son. I said, no, sir, your son is in Vail skiing. Does that sound like somebody with problems? No. You are in a psychiatric hospital. Now, what kinds of people come to psychiatric hospitals? People with problems. See, these are your problems. That you own them. So here's how I'm going to help you with your problems. He doesn't have any problems, so I can't help him. I'm going to help you because you got lots of problems. Here's how I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you to help him to have some problems. I'm going to teach you something called boundaries. Now, why is this important to leaders? Because a lot of times leaders, and I've seen this with major performers, they're not setting limits on people's poor performance, sometimes the cultural problems that somebody creates with their behavior, sometimes the way they have to kind of cover for them or somebody else has to cover for their areas that they're not dealing with. They're afraid to confront them. They're afraid to set limits because the person is defensive or won't own it. And they're owning all these problems that are creating stress and isolation, all the other emotional stuff. And it may not just be at work, it may be in their extended family. It may be with an adult sibling. It may be with anybody in their personal life. This area of boundaries is going to affect you in your leadership as well as your personal life. And when we don't feel like we have basic freedom and the ability to set limits, to say no to things that aren't good, to confront people, to keep the bad stuff from falling into our yard that somebody else is responsible for, as well as having the freedom to choose and do the things that we need to do and not feel controlled and manipulated, then to that degree, we are going to be symptomatic in some way. Let's see what Martin said about how he experienced this.
I realized that when I had a room of people that I worked with regularly, say my direct reports, that there would almost be some majority that I really liked and enjoyed, and 1 or 2 people that just consistently annoyed me. And if I was going to say something harsh or something I shouldn't say to anybody, I was going to say it to them. Along the way, I had somehow concluded that folks who resisted feedback or criticism or other input that I thought was objective were folks that I should just stop giving it to, whether I was concerned about how they would feel or the nature of the conflict that might happen. I just didn't tell them much, or didn't tell them much in healthy ways. So if it would come out, it would come out curtly or harshly, as opposed to in the way that I would talk to somebody who I thought would welcome some feedback, or at least was penetrable, when I started more consistently telling everybody in the group exactly what was going on. And a big surprise was, I thought that that was something that would help other folks succeed, but it actually was really important in helping me to succeed. I felt better, there was less tension in relationships, and I was just more likely to do my best on their behalf, or for us to all work together in a way that each of us enjoyed more and drove productivity.
So one of the things we hear from Martin is, you know, when you don't have boundaries, you're not stepping up and confronting things, even people that are difficult, you're going to have symptoms like he did, you know, the harshness or it gets to you over time. And what are some of those symptoms? Let's look at them. Depression. One of the formulas for depression is something called learned helplessness. And that's where we learn, our brain gets tricked into thinking we're powerless. I can't say no to this person. I can't confront this problem. I gotta keep taking care. And we get in these goofy places in our head of taking responsibility for people and not setting limits. It leads to depression or anxiety. What if you feel like somebody else is in control of your life? How scary is that? If another car has the steering wheel to your car in a different lane. See, when we begin to take control back, that's one of the main elements of treatment that we have for things like panic disorder. When we get people to begin to take control of what they can take control of and let go of things they can't. Now, sometimes other people's performance, you can't take control of that stuff. Codependency, enabling behavior, powerlessness, as I said, addictions, all of this can be from a lack of boundaries. And that's my point. We don't have to go solve all these symptoms. We got to get the right bucket and start to solve the problem. So how do we do that? Well, first thing is start to set the boundaries that you're not setting and build the limit setting skills. Some of you need to go back to previous Summit courses or some of my materials or whatever and learn the skills on how do I have the difficult conversation that I've been avoiding. Take extreme ownership. You know, if you're feeling a certain way, if you're like, well, they're doing this to me, well, sometimes we're allowing it, and it's time to step up and set limits as we own our side of what I'm not doing by not setting limits to keep this thing going. Set limits on bad behavior, set limits on poor performance. A lot of times in leadership, you're letting people slide. They've been there a while. People are covering for them. Everybody knows it. But it's difficult sometimes to have that necessary ending that you need to have. I've said to many leaders, you're one firing away from success. And sometimes we enable and allow poor performance or just somebody's in the wrong role, and it's hard to have that conversation. You are a steward over the mission, and to address those things are really, really important, not only for the mission, but for your well-being as well. So we got to set those limits and then also realize not only do we need to say no, but we got to hear no from other people and respect other people's freedom in our lives. That adds to your sense of being in control when we stop trying to control others. So let's stop enabling, stop taking responsibility, stop being hurt without confronting it, get better boundaries. A lot of these symptoms are going to get better. Okay, so we've covered two buckets, the connection bucket and the freedom bucket. Now we're into number 3, and that is this. How do you handle the imperfections within yourself, within others, and within the world around you? Let's see what Martin says about that.
I had a strong tendency to take a mistake that I had made and give it way too much space in my head. And I thought it was virtuous, that I was objective, that I didn't have a sense of denial about my own mistakes or my own flaws, and that in some way that it was healthy. And what I learned over time was that actually I was really proficient at self-condemnation, defining a mistake as having almost a moral fiber to it, that it made me bad as opposed to good, and sort of extending that into what I thought I should be like or should have done in that situation, to the point that something might distract me for a day. That today, after a lot of thinking about this, might distract me for a minute or two. And it could be legitimate mistakes, not a pattern that you're going to repeat for a long time. And yet I would give it a weight or a presence in my mind that sort of defined me as not that good at what I did. And there were one or two good things that could come out of that. I might go to work harder on something, or arguably, Henry, I would have never gone looking for you if I could have stopped being harsh with people, which, you know, is in a category of just not giving people the experience of you that you want them to have and leaving them feeling in a way you don't want them to feel. But the larger point in this context is I just felt like it was some sort of pervasive thing that was wrong with me, when actually it was something that either I needed to systematically go to work on or something I just needed to process and not do again. And as soon as I started to take it out of the moral realm, that I was either a good person or a bad person based on how well I was doing my job, then I had the freedom to think much more differently about what the next right answer might be or what I might want to do next. And of course, the beauty of being less hard on yourself is then you start to be less hard on other people.
So have you ever felt that? Well, what's the issue here? This is the third bucket that I call acceptance of the imperfection versus judgment or denial of the imperfection. You know, we live in a world where go back to the story of the Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect and you were perfect. And I was perfect. We only had perfect people around us. But then it says that the world went into an imperfect state. And here's the deal. In the imperfect state of this world, we can still see portions and glimpses of what the ideal looks like, what a perfect result would be like. We can imagine what the perfect you would look like, or the perfect outcome of a project. And yet the reality is, and this is reality, there's always a gap between how we can conceive of how good I should be or could be or ought to be and how I really am. Now here's the issue. How we deal with that gap is the difference between thriving and not thriving. You know, on the not thriving side, sometimes having a lot of emotional symptoms, depression, anxiety, and all that stuff that we've been talking about. So what's the magic? How do we do this in this gap? Well, first of all, we got to look at the content of the gap. What lives in this imperfect gap? Basically, pain and shame, right? It's the pain of losses and injuries and woundedness and maybe stuff from years ago that's still inside that hasn't been processed yet. Trauma, abandonment, being abused. But it's not only the pain. It's also the shame and the guilt and the feelings of badness about not what's happened to us, but also the stuff that we've done. So how do we resolve it? It's all in the tone of how we face this gap. Is it harsh? Is it critical? Does it beat us up? Or does it come with grace and compassion and embrace the reality of the pain and the shame and where we are and nurture it back to health where we can live and thrive and learn from it? It's one of the most important things that we can do. Let me read you a couple of stats. In 1996, in the airline industry, there was one crash per every 2 million flights. 350 people died in airplane crashes that year. Now, listen to this. In the past 12 years, we have had 8 billion passengers fly without one fatality or fatal crash. Now, we have one fatality, listen to this, for every 120 million departures. That's pretty close to perfection. But they didn't start there. So how did they get there? Well, what they did was they all came together, the airlines and the equipment makers, the pilots, the mechanics, the unions, and they made a covenant, they made a pact. We're going to agree to report all of our failures, all of our screw-ups, all of our mistakes to this group without fear of losing a job, recriminations of any way, getting fired or fined. The FAA agreed to it because we want to have a safe place to process imperfection. when they did that, and they reported the near misses, the screw ups when the mechanics missed this, or the way that the air traffic controllers did, whatever it was, everybody came clean. And exactly what all the performance research shows happened, that when we are safe to get curious and learn from our mistakes without getting beat up by them, then we do learn from them and we improve. That's the science. The brain actually can't get better when it's playing defense against all the attack. It just can't do that. But when we have safety, it can. I remember in my life, one of the probably the biggest business failure I ever had, I bought a company and put somebody in charge to run it, and I didn't pay attention because it wasn't the main thing I did. And then he just took it in a horrible place, and when I found out how bad it was, I'm feeling like an idiot. How could I do this? What was I thinking? And I remember I was at home one night, just terrible. Terrible. Well, about that time, the phone rings, and it's my main mentor in life who, to me, everything he did was perfect. And he's calling me at this moment. He said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Well," and I told him, and I remember I poured this story. I was waiting for the judgment and the criticism. "You idiot, how can..." And you know what he said? He said, "Well, we've all been there." I said, "What do you mean we?" I said, "You?" He said, "Oh yeah, we've all made that." He said, "Everybody's ever done anything has made that mistake. Hired the wrong person, didn't watch over it, and there you go." He said, "But once you do it, you'll never do it again." And we talked for about an hour, and I remember at the end of the phone call, I didn't have a plan, I didn't have new money, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was different. There was something about the safety to come and process that stuff where it metabolized it. I woke up the next morning, and I went and attacked it, and we fixed it. But I could have gone down a black hole and maybe never to return. So it's this process of that gap having that kind of safety, because if we don't, we become symptomatic. Perfectionism, critical attitudes, depression, obviously depressed, we're not processing things, unresolved grief and injury and pain, lack of ability to emotionally regulate stuff. Like Carol Dweck says, we need a growth mindset about this negative instead of a look into am I good or am I bad? No, we need to be curious and learn. Addictions, all of these symptoms. You see a lot of these things melt once you start to deal with the one bucket of how much safety do we have to process our pain and our shame. It gets better. So what does it look like? Well, we got to embrace our vulnerability. Remember I talked about earlier about your need states? Well, this is about the pain states and the failure states, coming clean with those, processing them somewhere where you have a safe place to do that, getting curious about them, learning from them, instead of judging yourself. And monitor the tone that you have about your failures. Is it loving? Is it compassionate? Is it encouraging? Facing the truth of it still? Or is it condemning? "You idiot, how could you do this? You're so..." And that badness, that doesn't make anything better. And it's why, speaking to you people of faith, what is the good news of the gospel? It is that you are accepted and forgiven for all of the bad stuff. Now we can grow and get better, but we don't do it that way, do we? Oftentimes we make it unsafe, to be honest, especially with leaders. So you need a place to go do that. And as you're monitoring these things in the tone, make sure that you also have this place, like that group did, like I had with my friend, where you're taking the sting out of the gap, and it's a safe place where we can look at and resolve the problems and then turn that outward and be forgiving and accepting of other people as well. Not denying, but having a different tone towards the pain and the shame. When we do that, it gets better. So we've talked about connection and freedom and acceptance. The fourth bucket is the issue of adulthood versus remaining a child. Now, we all start out little people in a big person's world, and what happens? Well, you keep growing up physically until you're tall and you're one of the big people. That doesn't automatically mean, though, that it happens psychologically. See, people can get fixated feeling like I'm still a child in an adult's world, even though I'm however old now. It should happen around 18 or 22, where we become an adult. in California, where I'm from, it's 47, but the issue remains the same. We've got to become an equal adult with other people psychologically, because if we don't, then we remain in this one-down position, and we're people-pleasing and looking up to people and fearing their, approval or loss of approval. And what happens is that diminishes you, and it makes you symptomatic in a lot of ways, and it keeps you from performing at your highest levels. And we can't chase every symptom in the world, but we can go after this issue, and that'll resolve a lot of the symptoms. I remember a woman came to see me one time. She was sexually non-responsive to her husband. They had a great relationship, been married about a year. She says, my body just doesn't respond. I diagnosed some things. I asked her, do you have a couple of women in your life that you really look up to and put up on a pedestal, and they're like, and she said, yeah, 2 in my church. How'd you know? And I said, well, I'm a shrink. That's what we do. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to lunch with each one of them, and I want you to disagree with 3 things they said. She said, why would I do that? I said, just do it. She said, well, I don't disagree with, they know. I said, look, they like vanilla, you like chocolate. They like this movie, you just say it. I just want you to say it. She comes back in a couple of weeks later, or the week later, and she's visibly shaken. I said, what happened? She said, well, I did that, and we got in a conversation about school and my kids, and one of them said I should be homeschooling, and the other one I should be public schooling, and I didn't know which to agree, and I had my own opinion, and now I don't. What had happened? Well, now she's like getting scared because she's starting to take them off the pedestal, and she's getting into challenging her parent figures with their own opinions and views. Well, she worked on that for about 6 months and started to express herself and own her power. And even when she disagreed, or even when she wasn't right or wrong, she was an equal adult with her own values and her own opinions, and she started to own those, and she really started to grow. About 6 months later, she comes in one day and she goes, I don't know what happened last night. And I said, what? She said, well, my husband, he started getting frisky and then in my body. And then I started, and then I said, just calm down. Don't do it here. Just, tell me about it. But she said, what happened? I said, well, your body caught up with your mind's growth. In other words, children are down here, adults are here. You became an adult psychologically, your body got connected and it responded like it's supposed to. See, all of these symptoms we talk about, they're all over the place, but a lot of them are really caused by a basic issue. Her people-pleasing went away, her anxiety diminished, her sexual responsiveness got better. Why? Because she stepped into this issue and she became an adult. Stop putting people up on pedestals, stop trying to please them, having her own opinions, her own strengths, stepping into her power, and she grew. Let's see what Martin has to say about this issue.
Henry noticed, I had seen it but had chosen to ignore it, that when I would get 360 feedback, my own assessment on the same dimensions would be quite a bit lower of myself than others had me. And that's relatively common, but my gaps were really big. And I thought it was sort of a badge of honor, that it just meant that I had a sense, of what my own weaknesses were and was objective about myself. And the fact that I could present myself differently to other people didn't mean that I should rate myself any differently. And instead of it being a virtue that I would rate myself more negatively on some dimensions than my colleagues would, you set it up as essentially a constraint or a limiter in how effective I could be. And you explained to me that if I didn't see myself and my role in the organization as others saw it and didn't act on that, that it wasn't going to be good for me or for them. And specifically what you told me to do was to start more sentences with "I want," to just recognize that there were enough people around who thought that I knew what I was doing and who wanted to get to the next right answer and who needed direction anyway, that I should say, I want you to X, or I would like the following 3 things to happen, and not to fit those in some broader strategic discussion, but simply make the personal statement, I want you to do whatever it is. And what I found was that you were exactly right, that people appreciated that even if they thought I was wrong, that kind of personal directness about what the need was exactly the conversation starter that ought to happen. And in many cases, it just resulted in something good happening more quickly in a way that we all thought was right. I think you really helped me reconsider what full potential meant for me, Henry. I needed not to anchor in other people's feedback. The fact that my view on certain performance dimensions or leadership practices was that I wasn't as good as some people around me wasn't the issue. It wasn't the relative question. It was just having an accurate view of what was possible and what I could accomplish, and more importantly, what I could accomplish by giving people the best of me. How, in some cases, just saying like, you know what, no, I don't think that works. I want you to do this, because I was sure it was right and because I wasn't concerned. My view was whatever it was about myself, but just went with that instinct, was in everybody's best interest. And that was hard for me to get to. And it was particularly hard because I objectively knew I made mistakes and got things wrong. At the same time, having success, creating success, helping others thrive is completely dependent on you being comfortable with yourself and including what you're really good at. And other people relax the more comfort with yourself that you demonstrate to them. You actually hear them differently, but also they hear you differently, because it's just a natural, authentic outgrowth of what you know to be true or what you've experienced or seen or needs to happen in that moment.
So see, this is a big issue. Even with high performers sometimes, we all have these lags where we kind of haven't quite grown up. And when we do that, what are the symptoms? Well, inferiority feelings, being one down, people-pleasing, needs for approval, getting validated all the time. Anxiety, am I good enough? Depression, feeling diminished or inferior, what a depressing feeling that can be. Black and white thinking, like children do, rigid black and white thinking, comparing ourselves with other people. Addictions, you start medicating the bad feelings that this creates. And then once you get all those symptoms, how do we put our arms around that? Well, we try to help with symptoms, so you got to go after the issue. And the issue is this feeling one down. So what do? How do we fix it? Well, number one, start to own your own opinions, like the woman did, like Martin did. Start to speak your mind. You can identify in your life who you're kind of afraid to speak your mind with. Maybe it's still one of your parents, even as an adult. Maybe it's an in-law. Maybe it's somebody, a boss, or somebody you look up to. You are an adult. You can disagree. If they're your boss, certainly we submit to authority, but you made an adult decision to do that. Step into your sense of adulthood and your talents and abilities and speak your mind. They need to hear it. Take people off a pedestal. Stop comparing yourself. We all have different abilities and experiences. Stop comparing yourself, trying to wonder if you're good enough for them. And then try and fail and learn. That's what adults do. We experiment. We go try. That doesn't work. Doesn't mean we're a loser. You go and learn from it. Take the next step. Adults increase their expertise over time. See yourselves and others as different but equal. We all have different abilities, different brains, different talents. It doesn't diminish you because somebody else is smarter or faster or whatever it is. You're still an equal adult with all of the rights of adulthood. What the Bible says is that you're his workmanship, created in Christ to go do a bunch of good works. Don't diminish that incredible creation of you that he's made. Claim your talents, claim your abilities, and step into them and get to equality. Equal but different. When you do that, a lot of these symptoms begin to diminish. So, we've looked at 4 of these: connection, freedom, acceptance, and adulthood. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and reflect. What are you being prompted to go maybe focus on and work on first? Or which one of these issues is kind of calling out to you, or which one or two? Just take a moment, reflect over the things we've talked about, and identify what your next step is going to be. Maybe for you and maybe for some of the people you serve. Just take a moment of reflection now. So in close, I just want to say a few more things. And number one, if you can identify with something we've talked about and have some pain in one of these areas, which all of us do somewhere, go find a good place to process it. Find a counselor or a mentor or coach somewhere where you're safe to go really look at these issues. Number two, that doesn't only have to be formal. Now, here's one of the main things I want you to see today. These 4 buckets are things we address like throughout all of life, okay? In our small groups, in our friendships, in our families, we're always trying to get more connected and establish freedom and processing the bad stuff. Now, this is a continuum. I want you doing this with your friends and in your best relationships. But sometimes, like, you might talk about your budget and finances and get some tips from somebody informally. Sometimes you might have to go see a CPA. So this is a continuum. Sometimes we do have to find somebody that can take a deeper dive with more expertise about how what went into this deep emotional isolation and unravel that. But it's always a continuum, and we always want to be getting the appropriate level of help we need. And then thirdly, leaders, you know what? You can do this for your people. You can provide spaces and ways. In the pandemic, I've worked with CEOs who have a morning call, some of them, for an hour, and they just process what it's been like for the pandemic. Now, I don't know how formal you're going to do it in your leadership setting, but what you can do is you can make spaces for connection. You can make spaces for them to process things. And some of you church leaders especially. And finally, that's who I want to speak to for the last few seconds here. Church leaders, we have a mental health crisis, as you know, and you're the ones on the front line of communities. The gospel is the good news of getting people in these areas of pain, getting them healed. It's a gospel of reconnecting from isolation, reconnecting with God and with small groups of communities of people that care. It's a gospel of helping them regain self-control and stand up to abuse and set limits and not be manipulated. It's a gospel of confessing and learning that they're forgiven in all the bad stuff and all their failures and being able to grow from that. It's a gospel of empowering them to grow up and use their gifts and abilities. And spiritual communities can embrace these 4 areas and really, really begin to affect a huge, huge, huge path of results in all these symptoms and areas of pain. I would encourage you, church leaders, this is the calling of Jesus. He said, I came to seek and to save that which was lost. Seek means look for, save means heal, and lost, that Greek word, it means broken beyond repair. He came to look for everything that was broken and to heal it. This is in your purview. This is in your mission. Let's not relegate it to the psychological community and wave the white flag and say we're not equipped to do that. You are experts in these 4 areas. And I really want to encourage you to go and do it. All of these issues help mental health struggles. Let's normalize it. Let's put our arms around it. And let's go win this war. God bless you guys.
What a really insightful talk there from Dr. Henry Cloud. And I know I want to sit with this a little bit longer, and you might want to as well. So we invite you to dig in. I'm going to take this opportunity right now and encourage you as well to download Henry's slides. You can download all of his graphics from the Summit Guide so that you can really think about your next growth step, That's what it's all about. But freedom versus control, that's something I'm going to be sitting with. And so many leaders ask us, it's not just about helping myself be a better leader. It's how can I help those around me? How can I help my people? And Henry's resource out now, it's called Churches That Heal. It's all about how churches can become a place of healing for their congregation, for the community, and all those principles also transfer to business, wherever you might work. So the Summit Guide, on the Summit Guide, there's an extra video clip where Henry shares how Martin was able to create this kind of safe place for this whole organization. Again, that's found in the Summit Guide, which is and the GLS online
the
experience.
online experience,
Everything
is that right?
leads through the GLS, the online experience.
That's right. And of course, today, as we've been talking throughout the day about the thought that you're thinking about, the thing that you're going to walk away with, that you're taking away, that you're really going to dig into, we really want to encourage you today to really think about what's the dream that you're going after. We're waking up. We're going to dream, maybe for the first time in a long time for a lot of us. What is the dream that you're going after? What's the one thing that you're going to do to get you there as well? Because we can't just dream about it. We've actually got to take the steps. We've actually got to move.
Tomorrow?
I'm not singing tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. I enjoyed it, but we do have a treat in the morning though. There will be more fun happening in the morning. So we definitely want to make sure you're here for that. So.
You just were teasing me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm super excited now.
Well, then I guess that's just for me to know and for you to find out as well, as well as all of these fun people. Also want to remind you about the incentive today. As I mentioned just a little while ago, I think we have passed the time, or we're very close to the time. In just a few minutes, ticket sales for GLS 2022 will go live in just a few minutes, and the incentive today is if you register today for next year's GLS. You will also get the GLS Special Edition, which will be this winter. It's a one-day event. You will not want to miss it. You'll get that for free along with your access to GLS 2022. So make sure you register today for that.
And 2021, we have all kinds of surprises for you, including our community hub. It's a chance for you to connect with other like-minded leaders. It's a vital part of leadership. We know that creating community. And guess where you can find the community hub? Anybody have any guesses? There we go.
That's
GLS
right.
online experience. If you're ever lost, it's all on the online experience. And you can video chat with others that are around the same interests, have really provocative conversations. But the Community Hub, there are limited hours. It's open right now, and it will be open again during lunch tomorrow. So go check it out now, the Community Hub and the GLS online experience.
Right. Another great way to engage there. And of course, we don't want to get out of today, this last thing here, without thanking one of our incredible partners that has made Session 4 happen, and that is WinShape Camps, WinShape Leaders. I don't know if you are familiar with them, but we're so thankful that WinShape Teams has joined us as a 2021 Global Leadership Summit partner for the first time. You may be wondering, what's next for you and your team after Summit? We're halfway through. We got one more day tomorrow.
Next for me and my team?
Well, I will tell you, there's a way to maybe dig into that a little bit. Maybe you're here today and you're thinking, okay, how am I going to get my team on the same page? Or maybe your team needs some time together after spending the last 17 months apart, as we've all seen being spread out across the world. Well, WinShape Teams has been coming alongside leaders and their teams for more than 30 years to tailor retreats that can help them overcome issues like communication and culture and working toward results effectively, things that we've all experienced and felt. So if that's you, you can learn more about WinShape at winshapeteams.org/GLS. Thank you so much to WinShape. This has been a really great day. Yeah.
Could you please just give us a little bit of song and dance before we go? You have to end the evening how you started it.
Yeah, I don't think that's. I think we're gonna take away my dream is what I'm gonna end. That's how I'm
that's
gonna
when
end.
dreams become nightmares.
Dreams.
Is that what happens? We have a lot of speakers, a lot of faculty coming up tomorrow. We have 7, so get a great night's rest, have some great conversation with your teams, and we're so blessed to do this with you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow, 8:30
Central
We're
tomorrow
kicking it
morning.
off.
We will see you then. We hope you have a great evening. Good night, GLS.